The wind
It
knows
hurts.
Easy
when
now,
a
I've got
story
you.
is
Hold
about
still.
to be told.
Please, help me
It
up.
hushes
Almost
the
there, lean on me.
grass, stills the birds, and leans close like it doesn't want to miss a single word. Before this tale begins to burn its way into your heart, do one thing for us. Subscribe to our channel and share this story with your friends. These stories live because you pass them on. Now lean in. This one hurts. But some truths only come alive through pain. He'd been warned, not by strangers or passing drifters who like the sound of their own voices, but by the land itself, by the way the soil dipped suddenly near the old cottonwood, by the way his horse balked every time they came too close, by the way his own body tightened like a fist closing around a memory it wanted to forget. Don't, she had said once, long ago. It still hurts there. The rancher did it anyway. And then he had a wife. Chapter 1. The first thing Caleb Rourke remembered when he woke each morning was the ache. It lived low and deep, like a splinter buried where fingers couldn't reach. Some days it was a dull companion, others it flared sharp enough to steal his breath. He never spoke of it. Men like him didn't. They learned to carry pain the way they carried water, quietly, carefully, without spilling a drop. The Rourke Ranch sprawled across miles of hard-earned Texas land, sun-scorched and stubborn. Caleb had inherited it young, too young, after his father died under a falling beam in the north barn. There was no time for grief back then. Cows needed feeding, fences needed mending, life kept demanding, and Caleb learned to answer with his head down and his jaw set. He was known as a fair man, but distant. Folks in the nearby town of Red Willow said he was polite enough, paid on time, didn't drink too much, didn't talk too much. The kind of man you nodded to, not the kind you sat beside. Women noticed him, of course. A tall rancher with broad shoulders and eyes that seemed older than his years didn't go unseen. But none stayed. Not really. There had been one, though. Her name had been Eliza. The memory of her came back strongest when Caleb rode near the eastern edge of the property, where the land sloped down toward a narrow ravine. Years ago, before the ranch felt like a weight chained to his chest, he and Eliza had walked there together. She'd laughed easily, like the world hadn't yet taught her to be careful. She loved wildflowers, said they were proof that beauty didn't ask permission. That was before the accident. They'd been riding fast, too fast, racing the sunset. Caleb remembered shouting, remembered laughter, remembered the sudden scream of a horse gone wrong. Eliza's fall had been brutal. Her leg twisted in a way that still visited Caleb's nightmares. He carried her back himself, mile after mile, her cries fading into tight, shaking breaths. "Don't go back there," she'd whispered days later, feverish and pale. "It still hurts there." The doctors said she'd walk again. They were wrong. She walked, yes, but with pain, with limits, with a quiet sadness that settled between them like dust. And Caleb, young and stupid and afraid, didn't know how to live with that. Eliza left before winter. She said it wasn't his fault. That made it worse. Years passed, the land stayed, the pain stayed. Then one spring morning a woman rode up to the ranch house with a dust-covered suitcase and a look in her eyes that stopped Caleb mid-step. Her name was Margaret Hale. She said she was answering an advertisement. Caleb didn't remember placing one. She said she was looking for work, any kind. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. He noticed things like that. She stayed. At first it was practical. Margaret cooked, cleaned, helped keep the books. She didn't ask questions about the Eastern Ravine. She didn't push when Caleb went quiet. She had her own silences, heavy with things unsaid. Slowly, without either of them naming it, the ranch house changed. It warmed. Laughter returned, tentative at first, then real. Caleb found himself waiting for her voice in the evenings, listening for her steps on the stairs. He didn't tell her about Eliza. He didn't tell her about the ache that woke him every morning. When he asked Margaret to marry him, it wasn't dramatic, just honest. Two people tired of being alone, finding shelter in each other. She said yes. The town was surprised. Some were suspicious, others relieved. A man like Caleb Rourke, they said, needed a wife. Margaret fit into ranch life as if she'd been born to it. She learned the rhythms, respected the land. But there was one place she avoided, just as Caleb always had, the eastern edge near the ravine. One afternoon, years into their marriage, Margaret finally asked, "What happened there?" She said softly. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Nothing worth talking about." She nodded, but her eyes lingered. She understood more than he realized. The drought came the following summer, mean and unrelenting. Water lines needed rerouting. The only viable source lay beyond the ravine. Every instinct in Caleb screamed, "No." Margaret watched him saddle his horse that morning. "You don't have to," she said. "We'll find another way." He shook his head. "This ranch doesn't survive on maybes." She touched his arm. "Just be careful." He rode out anyway. As he crossed the edge of the ravine, the ache exploded, not just in his body, but in his chest. Memories surged, Eliza's scream, his own helplessness. He dismounted, hands shaking, and for the first time in decades he let himself kneel in that place. That was when he heard footsteps behind him. Margaret stood there, breathless. "You were hurting," she said simply. "I could feel it." He wanted to tell her to leave. Instead, he broke. Everything poured out, the accident, Eliza, the guilt, the years of carrying what he never shared. Margaret listened without interruption, tears cutting lines through the dust on her fac. When he finished, she said something that changed everything. "I know pain like that," she said. "I was married once. He died here, in this ravine. I watched it happen." Caleb stared at her, the world tilting. The land hadn't just hurt him, it had hurt her too. The silence that followed Margaret's confession was so complete it felt unreal, as if the land itself had drawn a breath and held it. Caleb tried to speak, but his throat refused him. All these years, all this shared ground, and neither of them had known they were walking on the same wound. "My first husband," Margaret continued quietly, "his name was Thomas. He worked cattle for the neighboring ranch back then. One stormy afternoon, a flash flood tore through this ravine. We were younger, careless. I told him not to cross. He did anyway." Her voice didn't break. That frightened Caleb more than tears would have. "I've carried that day with me everywhere," she said. "When I came here, I felt it again. I didn't know why. I just knew it hurt." Caleb sank onto the dry earth, suddenly unable to stand. All those mornings waking with an ache. Maybe it hadn't been just his own pain after all. Maybe the land remembered, and he had been listening without knowing. "I thought marrying you would fix it," Margaret said, sitting beside him. "I thought love would be enough." He turned to her, eyes wet. "I should have told you." "Yes," she agreed gently. "We both should have." The drought worsened. Decisions had to be made. But something had shifted. Pain, once hidden, now shared, became lighter, still heavy but no longer crushing. They worked together to reroute the water without disturbing the ravine further. It cost more, took longer. The ranch survived anyway. Healing didn't come all at once. Some nights Caleb still woke with that familiar ache. Some days Margaret went quiet, staring toward the east. But now they reached for each other instead of turning away. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the land, Caleb took Margaret's hand and led her to the edge of the ravine, not crossing it, just standing close enough to acknowledge it. "We don't have to forget," he said. "We just don't have to live there." Margaret squeezed his hand. "Pain doesn't disappear," she said. "It changes shape when it's loved." The wind moved through the grass again, softer now. The land didn't hurt any less, but it no longer owned them. And that is how a rancher learned that some warnings aren't meant to stop you forever, only until you're strong enough to face them together.